evening, AP Euro folks. This is a brief video intended to give you a little bit of reminder and refresher on how to write a document-based question essay in case you missed part of class or in case things aren't fresh. Maybe watching this 7-10 minute video will help you in order to remember some of the key facts that go along with writing an essay. The document-based question is a fairly long essay in that it takes us 45 minutes to write. We have 15 minutes to plan. If you remember, I asked specifically this time that you mark in the essay when you get to that point of 45 minutes, and then at the end of the essay to let me know just how long it took you to write it so that we have a sense of how much chopping of time we need to work on over the course of things. Okay? So, if you're starting from scratch, let's do this. The first thing I want you to do is have a look at the rubric itself. The rubric is that little grid that is the back. It's at the back of the peasants DBQ that I gave you. I want you to flip all the way to the back to there and look at that rubric. That's really what we're trying to do here. Now, in our brain, we're saying we really want to write an essay. That is true, but let's make sure that in writing an essay, we write an essay that scores points. And not to minimize this down to the episode of scoring points, but that's really what the goal is here, is to write an essay that gets us as many points as we can possibly get. Let's go through each of the things on that rubric. So if you don't have it, go grab it really quickly, like right now. Okay, now that you're back with your rubric, let's look at the things as we go down them. Number one, you have to provide a thesis statement that fully addresses the prompts. Now, I'm cheating a little bit here because I'm looking at the prompt itself, and I want you to understand that this prompt asks us to analyze the influence of ideas about gender on the reign of Elizabeth I and explain how Elizabeth responded to these ideas. Now, the College Board is going to want us to provide a thesis that has at least one idea about gender, okay, with some degree of specificity. In other words, what do they think about women? What do they think about women overall? Do they think they're good, or are women inferior to men? Or is there this general feeling that women aren't fit to do things, or that women are fantastic? There must be at least one specific explanation about women in that thesis statement. There must also be some reference to Elizabeth's response. Okay? So you have a two-parted thesis statement here, ladies and gentlemen. It must, in some way, provide the first part, to quote it exactly, analyze the influence of ideas about gender on the reign of Elizabeth I. So some idea of what those ideas on gender are. What do people think about gender? And number two, you must explain at least some response from Elizabeth. Now, obviously, it's just the thesis statement. It's not the entire essay rolled into the first paragraph, but you have to do those things in order to get credit for a thesis. So please make sure that after you've written a thesis, you go back to your thesis and you ask yourself that question: have I included something specific about gender? And have I also included at least one, of Elizabeth's response, whether that be a verbal or an action, to those ideals? Okay? So that's our prompt. We have to make sure we address both parts of that. If you only do one half of that, keep in mind where you're headed. Highest score you can get is a 4. You don't want to do that. Now, making my way down the rest of the rubric and kind of looking over at my rubric here to make sure that I keep it on the right order with yours, there are 12 documents in this DBQ. That means in order to get credit for the second point of uses a majority of the documents, you need to use at least 7 of them. Okay? 7 documents must be used in order to get that second point. The third one's going to say that we have to demonstrate an understanding of a majority of the documents. Now, generally speaking, this falls okay. Most people don't miss this point because even if you misinterpret one document, that's okay. You can misinterpret one. You can't misinterpret more than one, though. And if you do, you lose that point. And here's the other thing I'd caution you about. This is one of the reasons I think you shouldn't go with 7 documents and 7 alone. If you misunderstand one document and you've only put in 7, then technically you've only put in 6. And in that sense, you're going to miss out on a lot of the points on the scoring rubric. So I always think it's a good idea. If you can get 8 or 9 documents into the DBQ essay, it's better to do that. Because even if you make a slip with one, then you've got one sort of emergency one, if you like, that allows you to say, okay, I got one wrong, but I still have the majority of them here. Look at how many of the things on the rubric are about a majority of the documents. If you suddenly don't have a majority of the documents, it's like, that's me just talking off points there. Unfortunately, you're not going to get a high score, right? So you don't want to do that. Make sure you use as many of them as you can. Going down, you have to support the thesis with appropriate interpretations of the majority of the documents. In other words, you can't have a thesis that is kind of over here, and then the use of the documents that's supporting something different over here. This doesn't happen much that could occur, but make sure that your thesis statement is being proven by your documents. Now, occasionally, someone will write the thesis statement at the end, right? You'll write something in the beginning because you're not quite sure what it is what you think, but then you write the whole essay and you go through all the documents, and suddenly you get to the end and you're like, oh, what I've been trying to say here for 45 minutes is, and then you write that out. That's perfectly fine, okay? And in that sense, that thesis is supported by the documents, and that's okay. But if you don't have a thesis, keep in mind this fourth point is gone. Number 5, you have to analyze the point of view in at least 3 documents. You have to in some way talk about the reliability of the author, perhaps, by their experience, by their position in society, their background. You have to talk about whether or not the document itself might tell us something. Is this a private letter? Is it a journal? Is it a publication? Is it something everyone would see? Is this a secret? How does that weigh in on our minds as to what the document's purpose is and how well it would be received? Does the tone have something to do with it? Is the person particularly angry? Are they, somber? Give us a sense of the tone. That's another thing you can do. The background of the individual can do it, right? If I'm a female and I'm speaking about the fact that all females should be able to rule the universe, there's a certain amount of bias and point of view that goes into that. If, on the other hand, I say something like, well, I, Craig Holliday, I know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know how you do, Holliday. I don't know how do you know what it's like to be a woman? You don't have the background there. So you'd have to be careful with that, right? And I jest there, but what I'm trying to say is you have to at least 3 times consider the point of view, the background, the reliability of the source, okay? And lastly, you have to make at least 3 groups, and those groups have to include at least 2 documents. You have to have at least 7, so here's my worry, is that I'm going to get a lot of people who go, Group 1 has 2 documents, Group 2 has 2 documents, and Group 3 has 3 documents, and that's 7, and it's 3 groups, and there you go. Beware of that, right? Because if you misinterpret one, if you don't use it right, suddenly you don't have the 7 documents. You'd still have 3 groups, because you'd have 3 groups of 2. But you're going to fall short of that 7, the majority, and that's going to hurt you. Okay. Once you get beyond that, you can earn extra points for more point of views, for more groups, for using all or almost all of the documents. In this case, that's going to be 11 or 12 documents. You can get it for adding in other information you might know about Queen Elizabeth, and we've studied her, so that might happen in some people's essays. You can get it for using the documents particularly well persuasively. You can get it for analyzing change over time. The point being that you can get more points if you get into that subjective zone at the bottom, but you cannot get there unless you get all 6 of the basic points in the top zone, and that's our goal on this first DBQ. 6 on the top. If we happen to get some points on the bottom, and I would be happy to see it happen, it would be fantastic, that's great. But I want a room full of people who can do all 6 of the basic DBQ skills the first time out, because if we have that, then we can build some monumentally good essays this year. Okay, that's what we're going to focus on. So, write yourself a thesis. Ask yourself whether or not it does the right thing. Build strong groups. 3 documents in a group if you can make it happen. That's a solid 9 documents in that DBQ. Write good point of view examples. Read your essay back through. Is it making sense? If you need help, you know how to get in touch with me. Email me. Hit me up on Twitter if you want to. Good luck to you folks. Have a good weekend, and happy DBQ writing.